It's fun to do lunchtime mini webinars. I'm glad to be here with you again this week, this Tuesday. What I recognize more and more is that what could be a small tip can go a long way, because what I'm bringing as a mediator is an outside perspective and how to prevent conflict and how to resolve it should that begin. And with just a couple tidbits of ideas, you can take this further with yourself and your partner. Today, we will be focusing on an issue that has more to do with family mediation than it does with workplace, but you'll see how it overlaps a little bit. And that is to talk about financial planning. I am not a financial planner, and it's far from my expertise. But as a mediator and working in conflict prevention and something that I call, here my light wasn't up, something that I call keeping up intimacy. Now, why have I been doing this? Working in family mediation, we're helping people at the end when they've decided we cannot continue in the intimate relationship anymore, the partnership, or in the marriage. And at that point, especially if their assets and debts substantial and children, there is so much to talk about and discuss and agree to. And that's where I come in, facilitating those discussions and those agreements and negotiations. And it's a really painful, sad time, and people's emotions are raw and stressed. So I want to make sure to support people to keep up intimacy through skillful communications, which a very specific way of doing that. And in that, I call that marital mediation or family wellness mediation. And all of these lunchtime mini webinars are to offer small tips that you can go a long way with, and I hope you do. Should you need further and individualized assistance, of course, we can work directly as well. We're working almost exclusively online now. And what's really exciting about that is people don't have to be right here in Santa Fe. They don't have to be able to drive in at the same time, and the comfort of your own home or office. So in marital mediation or family wellness mediation, we are supporting you to have skillful communications and agreements to keep up your intimacy. Skillful communications and agreements to keep up your intimacy. Now, of course, there's lots of things that need to be attended to in keeping up intimacy. But what people often forget are the skillful communications and agreements. And if you're not a person who leans towards making agreements and setting up structures, if that's just not really part of the way you manage your life personally, it can feel so strange to start doing that in a partnership. I hope to share with you why it's important to do that in a partnership and ask you to, at least give it a try, see if it helps. Working with people on the back end when they're done and they need to get out is sad. And I do it, and I love doing it because I want to help people heal and move on and take care of their kids and their responsibilities. But I do love marital mediation. Slightly different from family counseling or marital counseling, because again, it's a niche and we focus on skillful communications and agreements. If you can see or imagine skillful communications and agreements as like a framework, it's like the scaffolding that all of your intimate relating and fun and connecting and love and feeling can stand on, instead of having no foundation. And when good feeling fails, what's holding you? Okay, so one important piece of the scaffolding is the financial planning. I called it earlier, going to change it back to the real topic, financial agreements, because the whole point is to be able to communicate and make agreements, maybe even drafted, about how you manage finances. Okay, so in general, And a lot of what I've seen, people come into a marriage or a co-parenting or a partnership relationship. And the intimacy is what brings you together. And the intimacy is what glues you together and bonds you, and how much you like being with each other and you like hearing each other's thoughts and all of those things. And so we get together, and you have this income and you have that income and you have this inheritance and you have that debt, and you just throw it all together because the feeling of connection is so rich and so powerful. Why would you think anything else? This is why I'm here to say, at some point early in that great feeling, while it still feels great, plan how your finances work. Now, from there, it's all open. I have no other advice. I'm a professional neutral. I don't have something to say about which way to manage finances. I've heard people ask, sometimes on the front end, is it better to share all the money, or should we each have our own accounts? And the question is right back at you. Is it better for you to share all the money or to have your own accounts? So imagine there's many ways to do this. Have 2 discretionary accounts and a household account, or it all goes in one account and you meet every week about how you're spending. One credit card goes to this, one debit card goes to that. There's millions probably of possibilities, but here's the key. Agree. Consent. Set up the expectations. Okay? Agree. Have consent between the 2 of you. And the expectations are set up in advance, which prevents the conflict that comes when the expectations disappointed. I never thought you would use all of our money on beautiful carpets for the house and then not have enough money when we need to go to the dentist. How could you do that? What were you thinking? Well, that person was thinking whatever they knew best to think, because you married them. I mean, I say this often to couples, a little bit, in your face, but only to remind you, you married a precious person. You married a person you respect. You married a person who often you might admire, who has skills and also has places they don't have skills, and you chose them. So you can only expect from them things that you will understand and love, and you can expect from them things you won't understand and will not make sense and will not feel like a good fit. So what can we do to prevent that collapse and the weight and the hardship of how could you do that? What were you thinking? What would make you spend money that way? What would make you save money that way? On this side, the collapse. The good feelings always carry us. The misunderstandings and the tension fails us. Platform, skillful communications, and agree. Agree in advance about your finances. I kind of feel like begging. Agree in advance about your finances when it feels good. It doesn't have to be necessarily as soon as you get married. It could quite well be before you even get married, and when you're happily engaged and you start talking about, how are we going to structure our lives together? We know we're going to enjoy our lives together. We know we're going to have loving times together. We know we're going to be stronger together. All of that inspiration. How are we going to structure our lives together? Because lifestyles have structure. And if you've been doing it as a single person in a free form structure, it's still a structure. And if you've been doing it as a single person with spreadsheets and columns and multiple bank accounts so you can see everything laid out clearly, that's still structure. So when you come to make a financial plan or agreement for your marriage, that doesn't mean it has to be heavily structured. And here's where people get tripped up often. It only means it has to be defined, often drafted, and agreeable. That's it. How much structure do you want How much structure do you not want? How much structure are you open to hearing from the other party? And the only requirement is that you both agree. And that often takes negotiation. So one person starts by saying, I'd like to structure our finances this way. What do you think? Well, I like part of what you said. I'm not comfortable with another part of what you said. That's the negotiation. That's the communication. To be skillfully back and forth until you come up with a co-created solution. This is what we do in family mediation when there's significant asset debt and when there's children to take care of. We've got to come up with a structure, visitation, but also finances very much so. So why not do it on the front end is what I communicate often and communicating here. Marital mediation. Let's embrace the communications and the structures it takes to have our finances, our financial picture agreeable. If we're getting a divorce, the financial picture is still going to have to be agreeable, but with sadness and challenge, sometimes extreme, sometimes not, depending on your situation. Okay, so let's look into how. How do you start doing this? Early as possible, right? Before mistakes have happened, misunderstandings and pain has built up. So as early as possible, formal time, a structured time. I would like to talk about how we're doing finances from the beginning. One of the best ways to do it is offer it to your partner. Let's start at the beginning. Even if we've gone a year or two or a few months or a few years without like winging it, just assuming that our ideas are working out, even if it's been without agreement for a while. The least confrontational way to approach it is like, let's just start at the beginning. If we initiate with, for 2 whole years, I've been trying to tell you, we've got to cut back, and you haven't cut back. That initiation might get you somewhere, but it starts with a high level of confrontation and blame. So as soon as possible, try to gather yourself and approach. I think things would work much better for our intimacy, for our family, for our time, if we decide together financial agreements. Now, this is so simple. I think I'm bringing it to you, my beloved, my partner, the one I share my life with. I think things would work so much better if we could have a structure, an idea about finances that we both agree and then do. What do you think? Right? So it's so simple. We often get so complex because there's emotional trigger. That's why I say as early as possible before the emotions have built up. But it's still so simple to say what I think, what I propose, what I would love to see, and then ask, what do you think? And you'll hear an answer. Go from there. Okay, so your answer might be in conflict to your idea. What do we need that for? We don't have time to bother. We'll just keep chugging along this way, or don't bother me with that. Okay, that could be hard to face. Or something in the middle, which could be like, yeah, that sounds good. I don't know quite how to do it. And I really have headaches for all this right now. Get back to me later. A kind of yes and no. Or someone who says, yeah, that really sounds good. Let's do it. How about Saturday over tea? And then don't forget to ask for help, right? So in marital mediation, for instance, because we really focus on communication skills and agreements, express agreements, articulated agreements, that's something you could just decide together. We're not going to necessarily take on this whole marriage counseling and get into everything that's going on for us. But maybe you recognize that without this scaffolding, some of the structures that just your concrete reality stands on, that without those structures, you're abrasing each other, you're like in friction, it's something's not standing. That could underlie a lot of the emotional strife that then pulls down your intimacy. So I suggest to address the financial structuring with as little emotion about it as possible. Now, emotion might have built up. People often come with emotional content, emotional charge to financial structures and ideas. As little emotion as possible, which means your goal is to just find an agreeable plan. Your goal is not to convince the other that their whole way of viewing money is crazy, ridiculous, dumb, irresponsible, rigid, none of that. If you can, and get support. If you can't, stop bringing those things up. But just agreeable. And this is often what people are missing. This is why I'm so excited about marital mediation, is getting some structures in place and agreements in place can often be done by just not denying emotions, but placing them on the side for a sec. And once you have that scaffolding and structure in place that you've agreed to, it can often hold strong while you have more sort of breathing room to even look at the emotions of what you're going through and what your relationship is experiencing dynamically. Is it high conflict? Are you insulting each other? Are you demeaning each other? That's all like negative emotion and friction emotion. Well, one way to look at that is not look at the emotion, look at the structures of your lifestyle, finances. Okay, so I recommend that as early as possible, before any emotional charge is built up or little emotional charge is built up, hey, I'd really like to have some clear structure and agreements about how finances work here. Will you do that with me? That's like a handout, sticking a hand out to invite. Will you do that with me? Will you dance? And the answer has to be what it is. It might be easy, but it has to be what it is, right? Will you do this with me? So what are some of the skills once you're involved in the financial structuring? I've already mentioned this, but to repeat, the judgment of how somebody else perceives money, or the spending of it, or the having of it, or the earning of it, won't help unless you decide that you're going to go through some of those judgments and emotions in order to get to the other side. You know, you're going to talk about them and you're going to share them because you need to express. But saying you're always too rigid with money, I want our plan to be more flexible, has an accusation in there which won't help you get this collaborative feeling. So try to speak a proposal. I like flexibility with money. I need that to not feel too constrained. So let's set up a structure for these 5 things we know are monthly expenses, and let's have flexibility on these. What do you say? That's a proposal. What do you say? So that this volley of ideas, listening, allowing each of you to have a different idea, can bring you to the co-created solution. Okay, and share this video, maybe even if you want to propose this discussion with a partner. Then, if you need more help, you know, find a great family mediator who can work with you, marital mediation, not for separation at this time, but for what I call fair play negotiations, supporting you to really hear where the other party is at on this topic, what they think, what they feel about it, like a full hearing. Because if you're going to make a proposal to this other, you have to understand them first. And then you think, well, he needs that and I need this, so could we that? And then see, right? So fair play negotiations means the kind of negotiations that have the best chance to succeed, and the kind of negotiations that are not coercive, convincing, or sabotaged by extra emotion. That's how, when I'm participating, I help the negotiations fair play. You can, of course, take these skills and be your own mediators, really. I mean, you can mediate on yourself to think about how you're proposing things, and you could ask the other, similar to what I do in sessions. I think that would be hard to hear. Can we rephrase it but still mean the same thing? So you could tell someone, I'm having trouble hearing you when you say it in the context of everything I've done wrong ever since I was 5 years old. Could you say what you need without telling me everything I've done wrong since I was 5 years old, right? So these are some of this mediation facilitation that we do that you could, for sure, learn to do with yourselves. So I hope this is helpful. Let's recap just a little bit. Why does it matter? Having this scaffolding, or the foundation plus scaffolding of some of the concrete world realities of our lifestyle, like finances, is a relief. It's a relief of a burden of what just swirls you into conflict regularly. And it's a structure that can hold while other things are going on, which are going to be emotional, that are truly emotional, like how a child is doing in school, how's your job going, how are you healing from the relationship with your abusive parents. All of these things are really emotional and need to be worked out on that plane. But if we can take the financial structure and make it clear and agreeable, okay? So that's what financial structures need, is consent. They're agreeable to both parties, clarity, and well articulated. If it's well articulated enough for you verbally, great. One of the things I love to do is write things down, because that's just a clear articulation. And I do that when I'm facilitating a mediation process, but you can do it yourselves too. We're going to have a chart of, a flow chart of finances, or a column chart of this goes there, this goes there. We're going to draw on a big whiteboard until we get it right, and then take a picture of it, whatever that process of writing is for you. So agreed to. Another important point we made today on the front end. I would love to see people with the help of marital mediation or themselves doing this on the front end. And if you need to restart, if it's been a conflictual place and emotion is built up, there still is the possibility to say, I'd like to restart and really just address getting an agreement about the finances, and put aside the challenges it's made for us in the past. If you can. If you can't, then go through it, right? Go in and through all the emotions, but it's possible to sometimes just put it aside. I'd like to restart. And then within that, just remembering the goal is a consensual agreement, not coercion, not bullying, even, unconsciously bullying, and not necessarily addressing each other's whole baggage around finances. Could happen. You could decide it's a worthy task, worthy of your attention, time, and money. But you could also just make the structure and see how it works. In that, I'll add what I didn't say earlier. You could also say, let's make the structure, do it with our fullest devotion for 8 months, and then meet and see how it's going. Okay, so that was the recapping. And then just to tag, do workplace mediation also, how this relates to workplace mediation. We often don't want to imitate a workplace with our finances. We often don't want to be that calculating and that clear. But it's a worthy thought to bring into your home if you could, because it might help. If it doesn't help, don't. But in relation to the workplace mediations, because finances are often assumed to be precise and exact and calculated, it can be less of a conflict trigger in workplace. So it's worth for us to learn a little bit about, to think a little bit about, well, how would this operate if it were a business? And is that a model that could apply in our home to a certain degree, just because it would help, not because of any other grand philosophy or ideology? And then, like I said, giving it a trial period. This imitates workplaces that are functioning really well also, is to give a policy a try, to give a new team formation, a new structure for the day, timing structure for the day. We meet in the mornings instead of at lunch or whatever that is. Give it a trial period. This is also a skill to bring into workplace, and a skill we often forget at home but remember more in the workplace. Is we're going to try out this plan, see how it goes, and reconvene on October 28th, which is exactly 8 months of a trial. So don't forget to set up trial periods where you get your data. You see, how did it work? Did it feel good? Do we just need to tweak it a little bit? But co-create that solution. Don't forget, and I'll leave you with this. Your intimacy, your desire to be family is built on feelings of connection. There are ways that we can impede that feeling that are a shame, right? We only want to grow that feeling. So when we're able to, when we come to someone and say, your ideas about money suck, mine are right, we're doing it my way, you have just breached the connection. Maybe just a little, maybe just for a second. I don't know, everything's relative and dependent, but it's not it is non-connective to say, your idea on this sucks, your solution doesn't work, doing it my way. Co-created is what you're doing energetically, it's what you're doing emotionally. You're growing together, you're growing children together, many are. You're growing a business together, maybe. So your solutions have to be co-created. And even if I think I have a great solution, which I personally often think, because that's one of the gifts of my mind and my creative mind and the way I creativity and calculation, I often have great solutions. It's still, if I'm working collaboratively and co-creating, and what I want to build is connection, I need to ask, does this sound like a good idea? How would you feel if we use this structure? Can you imagine? I have the whole idea, okay? Whole entire idea. Here's my idea. How would you feel? Could you imagine into it? Would it work for you? Likely, I'm not going to hear a full out no, and I'm not going to hear a full out yes. I'll probably hear somewhere in the middle if I invite somebody. Show me yourself. Try this idea on in your mind. Just imagine it. Does it feel good? What feels good? What doesn't feel workable? And then that other can say, yeah, that feels good, all except for this. And then we look at what the this is. And then that's the co-created solution. So finances especially, I have witnessed people never having a clear agreement, never having a co-created agreement, but one person feeling coerced, whether that was the intention of the other or not, feeling like they just resigned, not attending to it at all. And it takes down marriages, not making blanket statements, but it can, and I've seen it. My colleagues have seen it. And why not use it as a prevention for taking down a marriage? Why not use it as a way to fortify your marriage? So that's where I'll leave it. Fortify your marriage through financial agreements and structures. All the best. Hope it works well.